All right, guys, we are back here with Bill Winke, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is why everybody should buy land. And we really think that, it's an opportunity for everybody. It looks different for every person, but...
And you don't have to buy big.
No.
You just got to get in the game.
Yeah, you got to make the jump.
Yes. And it's such a good asset for people to own because, I was even thinking about it yesterday, while we were out on our farm. It's like, I don't know anything about IBM. Or you name it, that might be in my stock portfolio if I had one.
I had to take a second to think, IBM, what are you even talking about?
As a company.
Right, I know. Apparently, I'm coming around.
Okay. So they could make all kinds of mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have no idea.
Right.
And then that investment goes down. But I'm out on my farm right now, as I was thinking about it, hunting deer, enjoying my time. I know exactly what I'm doing with respect to, the management practices of it, how much it costs to buy, what the market looks like, if I had to sell it, etc.
Yeah.
It's such an easy investment to self-manage compared to so many other places where we could put our money. So I just feel like, for me, it was a no-brainer. My whole life I've been, focused on land.
Yeah.
But, like we talked about, it's something that everybody can do, even if it starts small.
Yeah. We always look at land, and it's always too expensive, right? That's the first reaction of, holy smokes, you look at tax records, they bought it for X and they're selling it for Y. How is it? Why is it worth Y?
Right.
Well, that's what it's for sale for, right? So I'm not going to go into valuations, but the point of it is that piece of ground that you want is available now, and you've got one chance in your life to buy it. Mm-hmm. And so then it comes back to, do you have the gumption or the courage to take that leap like we talk about? And, the reassuring fact or the reassuring reoccurrence is that every time we jump into a piece of property, we're able to improve it. We're able to, like you said, get our hands dirty and actually know what we have and mitigate that risk ourselves.
Right.
We're not worried about if a CEO is planting trees in New York, we're doing it.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's a business that we understand.
Right.
So from an investment standpoint, I can understand people who invest in the stock market. I get that. It's a passive investment.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to stress over it each day, but you also don't have any control over it.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, unless you buy a mutual fund that invests in everything, or whatever, I think you have more risk with a passive investment in something you don't know anything about than you do buying land.
I would agree with that full-heartedly. And the reality of it is because at the end of the day, good or bad, you're able to make the decision. Mm-hmm. We were just talking about what a person has to evaluate when they're trying to buy land, and that's really three things. Let's say, do I want that property? Do I want it? Second off,
yes.
The answer is always yes. I have never walked a farm that I didn't want to own. And the second question is, how am I going to pay for this? Yeah. And the third question is, what's my risk? What's my range here of reality? Yeah. And we go back to this all the time. Is we're constantly buying land for a lifetime. So when we're evaluating risk, we'll jump right to number 3. We're looking at a lifetime, what that risk truly is. And even if, we've talked about how recreational land has only gone up in our history of looking at it. When we look at tillable land, there are some peaks and valleys because it's a commodity-based asset. Yeah. However, long-term, that trajectory has always gone up. Mm-hmm. And when we evaluate that risk and that side of it, we have to understand that your only loss is when you sell on a down, right? Mm-hmm. And that is, you talk to any financial planner, anybody that's looking at their 401k, and they can appreciate and understand that is, if you own 1,000 shares of IBM and you bought it at $1,000 a share and it's now 800, if you sell today, you lost $200. Yeah. If you hold, you haven't lost anything.
You only lose when you sell.
Right.
Yeah. So it's, and that's the other thing I like about land versus stocks is you can find out the stock price to the second. and there's nobody running up to me saying, "Oh, your land is worth, you know, X amount today."
Yeah.
You know, and that allows me to sleep better on that investment. Because
Right.
it always drove me nuts when I did own stock to see it going up and down like that. Because then it goes up, you're in a good mood. The next day it goes down, you're in a bad mood. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to deal with that. You know, I like land because really, unless you're focused on like some kind of almost like having an appraiser, you know, coming to you every day.
Yeah.
You have no idea what it's really worth. You know, until the time comes to say, well, I do need to sell, or I need to consider selling, or whatever. Then you start thinking, well, what is this really worth? You know, up until then, you just own land and you're excited about it, and you know it's probably doing pretty good. You know, but you know, I just didn't like that constant feedback that you get from some of the stock market type investments, where every single day I know what I'm worth.
Right.
You know, it's just nice with land that nobody was telling me every day what my land was worth. And you knew that, you know, trends were in the right direction.
Right.
You just didn't know whether, you know, it doesn't fluctuate like that.
Yeah, and so when I guess we're looking at the valuation, right?
Yeah.
So how would you say, like, when you bought your first farm, did you overpay for it?
No.
Did you ever buy a farm? I mean, I guess my question is,
Now,
do you ever feel like,
I used to celebrate every time I bought land when
Yeah.
I first started.
Yeah.
Now I don't. Now I'm like, oh boy, because it's so expensive now.
so what makes you still do it?
Well, because I want it, and because of what we talked about is I feel like it's easier to sell it than it is to buy it.
Correct.
You know, so when something comes up for sale, you're like, gosh dang, this is expensive. How am I going to pull this off? Well, if I can't pull it off, I can always sell it. You know, the hard part is getting it bought.
Right.
It's not hard to sell it. You know, maybe you have to say, well, what if you have to sell in a down market? Well, that can be risky. But, you know, we always assume the best, you know, when we get into something.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is I keep buying it because I love land, and it's been a good investment over the years. I don't know about this market right now. You know, we've talked about it. It just seems like, who knows, you know, but
Yeah.
I still, if my neighbor came to me and said, I want to sell, I would still try to buy.
Right.
You know, because the risk is greater, in my mind, to not buy it than it is to buy it. Because you can always sell it if you have to.
Yes, and I think that is where, especially in tillable land, you know, I sell more tillable land than I do recreational land. And why we continue, you know, lots of people feel uneasy right now in whether it's a land market or whether it's a stock market, whether it's at the gas pump, you know, it's just a weird time. But it comes back to, we need to look at, you know, your opportunity to buy that neighboring farm comes once.
Yeah.
And maybe it comes twice, but I bet you wouldn't miss it a second time if you missed it the first.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that it happens more than once.
Right, and so we're only looking at a snapshot of time of, you know, are we overpaying for that piece of property, or, you know, is it worth what we're going to have to pay to get our hands on it? Is probably the better way to say that.
Right.
And, you know, the answer is you're still buying that over your lifetime, and the trajectory is still going up.
And you have to trust one underlying economic principle, and that's the supply and demand curves.
Correct.
You know, and that's what sets price. You know, when supply and demand, supply drops or demand goes up, then that drives the price up. Well, you look at land, especially, and again, I like recreational land because it doesn't have an underlying commodity value.
Yep.
It's whether or not somebody wants it. So the supply of recreational land is falling because of development. You know, we know that.
Yeah, we're losing what, 1 million some acres a year of
Yeah.
land in general?
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't say, well, they're not making any more of it because they're actually making less of it. You know, so now you've got something that you own that the supply is going down at the same time that there's more people saying, I want to get out of the city, or maybe there's just more people in general.
Yeah.
So the demand is going up at the same time the supply is dropping. Maybe they're both moving slowly, but that forces that price to have to stay somewhere. You know, that's realistic for what you bought it at. It's not like those properties of economics aren't going to change. It's not like all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, now there's more recreational land, or now nobody wants land. You know, so as long as you trust those two principles of economics, then you can say, well, you know, I can stomach this. You know, I can swallow hard and say, oh, well, 5 years from now, you know, in theory at least, this should be worth more. and we've seen that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, because I always go back to the first time land buyer. That's the one who struggles the most, right? Because it's the biggest financial decision they've ever made. It's new to them, and it feels like there's a lot of risk because, you know, hindsight's 20/20. So you can look back and say, gosh, I wish I would have bought that tillable farm for $6,000 an acre, and now it's 10.
Yeah.
So that first jump is really hard because you're jumping in to an appreciated market from what you've seen over your lifetime.
That's right.
What's really easy, or on the contrary to that, people who have bought land for a lifetime, the guys that have bought it 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 15,000 even, they are able to stomach continuing to buy because they got in and they stayed in, just like we've talked about. So when we're paying the higher prices today, it's way easier to stomach because we've gotten the appreciation from day one on the other pieces, and so we've lived it.
That's why we always say the main thing is to get in, even if you have to get in small.
Yeah.
Because that gets you in the game, and not only do you get the experience of understanding that investment, but also you start gaining equity that you say, like we did one on 1031s, you know, another episode. It's like, well, now I've got something to, you know, like a checker, you know, whatever on the checkerboard.
Yeah.
You know, I got a playing piece.
Yes.
You know, so if there's another piece of land that comes up that I really want, I've got something here I can sell, do a tax exchange. So I just feel like, you know, a lot of people come up to me or catch me, you know, emails or whatever saying, oh, I'm thinking about buying this 40. What do you think? I don't even have to hear more about it. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, if the price is you know, fair or better than fair, why would you not?
Right.
If you can afford it, why would you not?
Exactly, and it's the most flexible, tangible asset that you will ever have the opportunity to buy. You know, and I think that once you get into it, you know, and you've done multiple episodes on this, on how you've bought and flipped farms into what you've had in your life, and you just learn to do what you have to do to get to that next piece. You know, so it's like you've got a big payment, right? That's the biggest thing that keeps you away from it. But you find ways to make that payment every time.
In some ways, it's sort of like that is what causes you to grow as a person too, because if you're just sitting back in your comfort zone saying, oh, well, I'm just going to work, you know, this 9-to-5 job my whole life, and then you get this land opportunity, like, oh no, how am I going to make that $50,000 a year payment on this piece of land I just bought, or $40,000 or whatever it is? Like, well, I better figure out how to do, you know, plumbing, or I better become whatever. And now you've got this sideline job, and little by little, you've changed your whole life because now you say, okay, well, my sideline job is a way better job than my 9-to-5 job.
Right.
So land forces you out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
A lot of people, it's that carrot for the poor dumb donkey, you know,
Yeah.
that makes him plod further forward. You know,
Yeah.
Land for me was always that carrot. I would be happy doing nothing, you know. So anyway, I think to wrap a bow around it, we've gotten so far off topic. Hopefully, people found something interesting in this, but that we feel like people should own land.
Yes.
That if you can possibly do it, then you should do it because the risk isn't as great as people think it is. People look at that payment and they think, oh my gosh. But really, if they can figure out a way to get past it or stomach it or move through it, then, and if they can't, they sell it. But if they can, then they've got an awesome asset, you know, long term.
Yeah.
But so that's the way I look at it, is like there's more risk in not buying it than there is in buying it. Because in not buying it, you probably not have a chance to do it again sometime in the future, and you really want, you know, to be in that game. You know, we feel like, you know, both Nick and I, that land is an awesome investment, obviously, and just encourage you not to let the market scare you, and get into the game. Buy something that you can stomach to start. Maybe it's not anything big.
Right.
But get in there, get started on this whole process, and then see where it takes you. So we'll be back with more of these, and hopefully, you know, we can bring you something that you enjoy in the future.